My guest on the podcast today is the one and only James Harrington. On a personal note, I've gotten to know James in the last couple of years. We've become friends. We've become, say, colleagues. We've supported each other through a variety of different things. And you are all in for an amazing treat. Because James is, I'm just going to, his content and the way he speaks is going to do way more than I could ever do. No pressure, my friend. So I'm here. James Harrington is the CEO and founder of the Ugandan Water Project, based in upstate New York. And we were recording this in March in the evening. And it's the 2 days after, or 1 day after daylight savings. And it's beautiful because we're recording this. I go, it kind of feels like it's still during the day.
It does. It's an amazing thing. For those of us that live in the Northeast, hope has come. We have survived. And I think we're going to make it.
I think we're going to make it. So James, so good to have you here. Want to start and have the audience just get to know a little bit about you. I said you're the CEO and founder of Ugandan Water Project. What else do you want us all to know about you?
Yeah, I've got a long and winding road that brought me here. And what's amazing is when you really find heart-centered work that just resonates with intellectually, socially, spiritually, physically, I like how it engages me. So many of my past experiences have showed up here. Everything from selling shoes at the mall when I was in high school, to growing up working in hardware stores, farm and feed stores, and learning general knowledge, doing manual labor, all the way through to I was a purchasing agent for a winery for a while. I helped run the back end of a Mary Kay business for a long time. I did all sorts of stuff. Worked at a church as a technical director, and believe it or not, all of these things have fingerprints on the work we do in Uganda, and it's unexpected, but it's true.
That's really cool. I always like to start with you specifically thinking about this conversation. The audience tell we know each other, and I already mentioned that. Why the heck clean water in Uganda as an American, as a guy from upstate New York? And I'm going to say this, there's a million problems in this world to solve.
Yes.
And a talented guy like yourself, you can probably choose to solve or work on almost any of them. I would love for the audience to hear your origin story of what had you go, this is a good idea. Or maybe you didn't think it was a good idea. You're like, this is something I should do. I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but yeah. But love to hear the origin story of Ugandan Water Project.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was 2007, May of 2007, Memorial Day weekend. And I ended up at a neighbor's barbecue. And there was a gentleman from Uganda who had come to the U.S. for a conference. And he was trained as a teacher. He had started schools and taught in schools. And he also was a pastor of a church in Uganda. And so he had gone to seminary and things like that. So he had all this education to inspire the spirit and cultivate the mind, and a dynamic personality. And he's just a great guy. And I had no idea any details about Uganda. So I was curious, right? And talking to him, he was hilarious and dynamic. And I was asking him, hey, what are the challenges you face in the work you do? And he said, honestly, one of the biggest challenges is that despite being good at what I do and loving it, I look into the faces of congregations and classrooms of people who are sick and hungry and thirsty, and my skills and abilities don't overcome that. And so that just struck me that, when you don't have safe water or you don't have sufficient food, that is an intellectual problem. Meaning, if you're trying to teach somebody, you can't teach them until you've overcome that hurdle. And same thing with water. So many things. Water comes first. One of our good friends, his name is Joe J. He always likes to say it this way: when you have safe water, you have the privilege of 1,000 problems. When you don't have safe water, you only get one problem, because it just dominates everything. That one problem dominates everything. And so talking to this man, all those years ago, I was struck with how profoundly expansive and it just swallows everything, the water crisis. And I started on an educational journey to learn and understand. I asked him all these questions, and then for the next 6 months, staying in touch with him and learning more, because I had a nagging suspicion that I could probably do something to help him. At the time, I was a road and tour manager for a band. We were doing small events up and down the East Coast and in the Northeast United States. And so logistics and relationships were where I added value. And I thought, hey, I think this water thing could probably be something I could work on for this guy. And so it was about
Mm.
a year later, after first meeting him, me and a few friends, we'd raised a little money around this idea of building some rainwater systems to put on community buildings. And we showed up in Uganda and helped to install these rainwater systems. And that was our first couple of projects in August of 2008. It was amazing.
And here we are to 2025. That is amazing. So almost 17 years ago now.
Yeah, it really is. It's been amazing to see how much time has gone by and how much we've grown. But,
Yeah.
why stick with it? I mean, why water is because frankly, I'm lazy.
I can appreciate that in the best way possible. Yeah.
And if you want to get something done efficiently, ask a lazy person to do it, and they'll find the effective way to do it. Right. And in this case, if you care about poverty and suffering in the world, one of the most effective ways to alleviate poverty globally is to address any gaps in the water needs of people, because it doesn't matter. So many of the causes that are important to, whether it's education or economic development or job skills or things like that, family stability, gender opportunities, all sorts of those things are dependent in one way or another on having access to safe water. Food supply for sure, medical, like clinical and public health. So many of these issues that are holding people back are dependent on water. And so essentially, I was like, oh, if we can address this, all of these other things, it's like a rising tide that lifts all ships.
No small amount of irony with the rising tide.
I've been accused of using a lot of water metaphors.
Water metaphors, which makes a lot of sense, James. At this point, I want to share with everybody that I got a chance to get involved with you, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, you and the rest of the UWP team. And I got a chance to see this firsthand in November of 2023. James and I and a cohort of amazing business leaders and people who are interested in this work.
Yep.
I got a chance to go to Uganda and witness this firsthand. And I want to share with the audience my perspective on something that I saw. And what if I remember right, I specifically told you this. We're talking about rainwater collection systems. So that's for all intents and purposes. And I explained this to my daughter's class a few weeks ago. It's just a gutter with another gutter that runs to a tank. And then that tank runs to a faucet and you turn it on.
Pretty simple.
In the United States, a lot of us have gutters on our homes. This is not a thing. We installed one of those, and by we, I mean the people on the trip. We watched your team on the ground in Uganda do a great job of the work.
You gave a hand.
I laid a couple of bricks because otherwise I would break the thing. That is not my strong suit. And I'm just gonna, without getting into the details, what really struck me was that school, I believe, had about 170 students, if I'm not mistaken, and support staff, the principal, the teachers. Before we installed the system for them, they would walk down to the well during the middle of the school day. So I want everybody listening right now who has children to think about this.
Yes.
10 o'clock in the morning, instead of studying spelling or math or whatever the thing they're doing, it would be, my daughter's name is Hannah. Hey, Hannah, can you go down and get the next jerry can of water so that we can cook lunch? And she would leave the classroom, leave her learning environment, walk down a muddy hill, and that day was muddy, to the local town well, which didn't look very appetizing.
Nope.
They would fill it up, and they'd bring it back, and they'd give it to the teacher. And then the teacher had to boil it.
You hope,
yes. You hope they boil it, because if they don't boil it, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And I'm saying all this because the rainwater collection system, labor, parts, all these things it's a little under $4,000.
Yeah. Yep.
And if you think about what we do here in the United States for $4,000, what we pay for the things, and I said, talk about an outsized impact. And that was the moment when I said to you, like, oh, now I get it.
Yes.
The outsized impact. So, and that's part of the reason I wanted to see what we can do, my family, and what we can do as Americans in a country like that, where there is a need and there's also the costs are low. And so it moves the needle a lot. So I want to encourage everybody listening to think about this for yourself. Think about your kid walking to get water, or your kid drinking the well water and then getting diarrhea or headaches, all the things that land in there. James, I want to go back in your story here. So you raised some money, you went over to Uganda, you installed those collection systems. And you and the team have done thousands. You've served hundreds of thousands of Ugandans now. Do you
Yes.
remember the feeling when you got that first installation and got that first group clean water?
Oh, absolutely. Because it was instantaneous that I realized that I was participating in something far bigger than I realized.
Yeah.
That first day was on Walakabu Road, just outside of in Jinja, Uganda, ironically near the headwaters of the Nile River. So there's water. In fact, there's one of the most iconic sources of water on the planet finds its source in Jinja, and yet it's not safe to drink. And so you have a water crisis, even in the presence of Lake Victoria is also there, the largest lake in Africa. And we installed this rainwater system, and our rainwater systems also go hand in hand with filters to make that safe to drink. And talking to some of the folks that were going to be using that first rainwater system and how that was going to impact their families, realizing some of these people were dealing with HIV and chronic illness, and just realized how much hope it brings for a family to know that something with real infrastructure and stability is there, because they have so much vulnerability, just cascading layers of vulnerability. And so it really, in an instant, I just was like, I knew this was good. I didn't understand how great it was. And it really, I remember after that first day at that first project, getting back in the van to go back to the guest house we were staying at. And I remember thinking to myself and just saying to myself, I could do this 1,000 times. And as of today, we've got more than 1,800 major installations. It's not just rainwater systems. We expanded beyond that years ago. We still do plenty of rainwater systems. We also repair hand pumps, like broken hand pumps. We drill wells. We actually have done some gravity flow systems where we find springs up in the mountains and we take them, several kilometers down into communities. And then we're starting to do a lot more with solar pumping systems where we're using solar energy to pump it to an elevated tank and then gravity feed that out into communities and even right to people's homes. So it's amazing to see what we've done, because we have done it more than 1,000 times. There's over 650,000 people in Uganda who have access to safe water from our projects.
Amazing. One thing I want to give you all a shout out for around the last model there, the pump and the solar. Yeah. You also have a business model where people get to have a sense of ownership because they pay for it. And when you told me what they pay for a jerry can of water, I laughed, but as a percentage, it's significant. But just say this to all of you listening, is you walk up, you have a key fob and you scan it, and you get your jerry can or your bucket of water, whatever it is you're getting. And they have a sense of ownership because they are paying for that. It's small, it's negligible, but it becomes a self-funding system, which then allows you to go out and do more work in that community or the next community, which is a real mindset shift when you are used to living in these communities with poverty, where you're like, either the government gives it to us, or the charity comes in and they give it to us, or we get nothing and we survive. And so you're in reinventing that context, which is another reason that I really love the work you all are doing. And I want to ask the last question here, that I know is on a lot of people's minds before we move in to how you view running a nonprofit. Why doesn't the government do more?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and for a long time, I have to confess, I didn't think the government was doing much. I didn't have relationships with district and national government. I had the assumption that it was all corrupt. Yeah, and I'm kind of a conservative guy. I like, don't get me wrong, I like roads and I like bridges and ditches and I like schools and things like that. So I like to pay all the taxes I have to, but I tend to like, especially with corruption, this idea, African government, it's going to be corrupt. I had always, for several years, avoided that. But then what we realized was there's a lot of amazing people working every day in the government, selfless people who have left the private sector to come be public servants. And they're inspiring, and they are working their butts off. But the economy is young. It's still largely cash. And so it's hard to harness the the tax revenue from cash transactions or barter transactions. And so there's just not a lot of revenue for public works and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's just so much that still has to be built. Keep in mind, they won their independence in the 60s. So
Yeah.
in 1963. So it really is a young nation. And and so they're working hard. They just still need a lot of help. And things like capital is expensive there. They don't have the tax revenue, then the private sector can make it up, except the private sector. I mean, here we can get loans at reasonable rates. There, it's not uncommon to find 18 to 28% interest rates on loans. And that's not a loan shark. That is like at a bank.
Yeah.
The best you can get for a loan rate there for like big projects is like 9 to 12%.
Yeah.
And so it's just very expensive.
Expensive.
Yeah, because it's a high risk environment. So the government is trying to do a lot. We actually partner a lot with the government, and they definitely do their part to try to help. They are definitely serious, and I have humbly changed my tune. We still do have to exercise a little discretion on, there's still a few people that have selfish intentions, just like,
of course, unlike the U.S. government, which is just philanthropic. No, exactly. That's only a Ugandan government thing. Altruism.
Yeah.
So James, I would have
servant heart.
Yeah, exactly. So I would assert, and one of the other reasons I wanted to have you on is to talk about, as the CEO of UWP, how you think about running it. And one of the things I love to hear you say is you say we're a charity that doesn't run like a charity. And you've been doing this now for 17 years. You've grown your staff significantly. You've grown the money raised and the impact year over year, keep growing and growing, which isn't necessarily a normal thing at a thing of your size. It's not like you're getting a ton of money from large global nonprofits or these big, the Gates Foundation isn't writing you a check every year and you go to do the work. You're doing grassroots fundraising. Right. You're going out there and do the work. So I'd love for you to share your brilliance around the audience of how you think about running an organization like UWP that allows you, and for people in nonprofit know this, to utilize more of the funds raised to do the actual work and less of the admin cost, which is one of the ways that nonprofits are measured.
Yeah. So there's a number of different things that go into our DNA that makes us uniquely us. One of the things that you'll hear us say is we run a charity, not a charity case.
I love that.
And that's important because we fight poverty. We try not to subject ourselves to it. Right. And yet
that's great.
We've all had that experience of people that work in nonprofits where you're like, gosh, it feels like these guys have their own expression of poverty. They have poverty mentality or poverty mindset. Lack. It's always lack. It's always crisis. And I find that really off-putting, even repulsive. Right. And so that's, the work is already hard. You have to approach it with intention for stewarding your own engagement, right? So that's one set of values, is just making sure that we don't subject ourselves to that poverty mentality. The other thing is, we try to run our charity the way I'm very entrepreneurial. I have a business background, and I only know how to run a business. And so we run our charity the way you and other entrepreneurs run their business. And the only difference is, I don't get to keep it, right? But we want to keep an eye on the bottom line. We want to diversify revenue. We really believe in serving our customers, right? Our customers or clients, and that would include the people that are donating. They have an interest that we want to make sure we're thinking about, and absolutely the people that we're serving. We really focus on value delivery and the value proposition.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, a lot of people, I hear it sometimes expressed this way: how do you go 17 years? How do you raise money and be a fundraiser? Like, don't you get sick of begging for money all the time? And my response is, hey, our organization does something that people really want to see done in this world. Yeah. And they want to see it done well. And if they can trust that it's being done well, there's a lot of people that want to be part of it. And on that foundation, when I say, hey, we have an incredible team of professionals, a few here in the United States, and then about 40 Ugandans on the ground in Uganda doing all sorts of parts of the work, professional people of excellence and passion and drive. And I am inviting you to hire us to do the work we do. So when we're asking for a donation, we're inviting people to hire us to create impact with their resources and our shared intention. And so it's almost like, it's similar to an investor model. The
brilliant.
Frizzell family has a stake in this mission, and you want to see the outcome, but the ROI is not a return on investment to investors. It's an ROI to the people that you want to see served and our world as a global community.
Yeah.
That mentality is not always what you see with common charities.
No. James, I love that. I've never heard you phrase it that way. You've got me thinking about, and I think this is really blowing my mind around. I want to hire you. That is not generally my mindset about charitable giving, including things like churches, giving money at churches. It's not generally the way it's, hey, we'd ask of your tithe or whatever you give, and in return, we're going to provide these services. But I've never heard the phrase hire us, which alludes to, or at least for me, means a different level of ownership on your end, responsibility on your end, that, oh, we're actually working for you to make this thing, because Jason, you don't know how to provide clean water. You can lay a brick or two or sing to the kids, but we don't want you doing that work, but we're going to take that money and do it. And you mentioned something as well. You didn't use the word, but I want to talk a little bit about efficiency in what you do. Efficiency. As the CEO, what does that mean to you when you're measuring efficiency across the staff, across the projects? What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think it gets back to something you referred to, which is, a lot of people, the only measurement they have for an organization is how much do they spend on overhead or administration.
Yeah.
Right. And don't get me wrong, you should ask that question.
Yeah.
The follow-up question should be, how do you measure that? Also, what's your overall impact, right? So, but it by no means should be the only measure, because here's something that I would say. When we spend money on administration or overhead, part of what that does is ensure that we have professional people who wake up every day, their feet hit the floor, and they are starting the best part of their day focusing on this mission. And so you get professional results. And so there's when you talk about efficiency, we really want to focus on high impact. We want to know that we are helping, the dollars are actually delivered and having an impact on lives. So we want to know how many people's lives are touched, and then how much they're changed. So we like to measure things like, when we bring clean water to a school, does enrollment go up? Do test scores go up? Especially like in secondary schools without safe water, there's a huge drop off. We just celebrated International Women's Day. There's a huge drop off in secondary schools of adolescent girls enrolled in school if they don't have safe water, because they can't hygienically address their menstrual needs.
Sure.
And so when we bring safe water, do we see the enrollment of girls go up in the school? So we like to measure, if it's at a clinic, we're looking at infant mortality rates, and we're looking at, infection rates, or just the number of inpatient versus outpatient. But we want to see impact. And then we also want to make sure that we have the people we need to deliver a high quality product and service. But we also look for ways to do that stretches the dollar. So for instance, we have most of our staff is in Uganda.
Yeah.
Partly because we can hire really professional people there at a much lower rate than we can do here. And that means that the dollars go farther. And so that things like that make a difference. And we try to brutally measure ourselves. So there's a couple things we do to just really track, hey, how are we doing? So for instance, we every year we take every dollar we've spent on anything. We don't separate it out by program or administration or fundraising. We just say every dollar we've spent, how much was that? and then how many people got safe water this year for the first time. And we just measure it. We just say, hey, we're not qualifying anything. It's just to exist. How many people this year? How many people got safe water? And we compare that to other organizations that are like ours, and we try to see it. And usually we've been able to stay in that sort of like $17 to $20 range.
That's great.
$17 to $20 for first access per person, which is really low. It's harder and harder to measure as our program evolves, because now we don't just focus on safe water access,
right?
In water projects. We're trying to ask a bigger question and address the bigger part of the need.
As we think about your 17 years of this sort of work, CEO, growing the organization, and just to say, you got a 50-some person team. You would be, if you were a CEO of a startup, you'd be a Series A or a Series B startup who have raised multi-million dollars worth of capital at this point, most likely. No, and right. I mean like venture capital, which I know obviously venture capital is not necessarily a thing. Although I guess you could call it venture capital in a way. Give you $1,000 and go and reinvest that. I'm not looking for a 10x on it.
We call ours adventure capital.
Adventure capital, yes. You get pictures of the families impacted. What are some of the things that you have learned over your time as a people leader and and somebody who's run an organization over your time doing this that you'd like to impart on any other business listener, any other business owner, anybody else in business out there? Because I'll tell you, James, to be honest with you, I always kind of held nonprofit as like, well, it's a little different and the urgency is not as much. And you probably heard this a million times. Urgency is not as much and you don't have venture capital. Nobody's like asking you to 10x their return. And it seems a little like, and my experience with it, this is my own limited viewpoint is, well, I give the United Way some money or I throw some money into the Salvation Army and then they do what they're going to do with it. I never have any idea.
Yes. So there's certainly, there's certainly donors that have that low expectation.
Yeah.
But I would say we have many of our most engaged partners, our engaged supporters and donors. Some of them are business owners, some of them are family foundations or institutional partners that really care and are looking to invest significant resources, 5 and 6 figures into this work. And let me tell you, you think, venture capital, I know people in the VC space.
Sure.
They will let a startup go 2-3 years,
longer.
Bleeding. Yeah. 5 years.
Sometimes way longer. Yeah.
Right. Now, granted, eventually they are hoping for a payday, but a ton of them just bleed. The demands on a nonprofit are that significant donors want to see a return on an impact on their investment, and they want to see a justified impact on an investment. They want to see our overhead be less than 20%, and they want to see that impact in 12 months or less. The same year that they give, they want to see a justifiable impact on it. That is high performance.
Yeah.
We have to turn that money around on a dime, implement it effectively, measure it as we go, and then account for it, report back, and do it on a very light overhead. And that also means that it can make it really hard when me as a leader look at the team and say, hey, this year I think we need to go into the woodshed and really do some capacity building. Like we need to really get on the workbench and start building some skills. We need to build out some of our team. If we have to do any R&D on something, if we have to learn a new technology, right now we're trying to onboard to Asana for project management, right? And that's a pretty heavy lift. Well, we still have to satisfy the expectations of our supporters while we do that. And so in some ways, for a high performance nonprofit, there are some things that are even more demanding than a VC relationship.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about, my career and mostly working in private business is a lot of the investments like, hey, we're purchasing Asana, we're doing training. That gets justified by, and by the way, we think it's going to make us this much additional revenue or save us this much in cost.
Right.
You don't have the concept of revenue in what you do. I mean, you have the concept of now with some of the things we talked about, like the clean water system,
Yeah.
but you don't have the revenue interns like, hey, if we invest in our program director getting this new certification in this thing, that's going to then create the ability to have us raise this much more money. It's more going to impact more people, being a more effective leader. So it's a different frame of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes justifying that, to me, that would make it a lot harder.
Yes.
When you're also trying to keep that admin cost down. But what are some, I definitely, before we wrap, and I'm going to throw this out there, you've got some banger stories from your time in Uganda. I've heard a few of them. Not going to ask one for quite yet, but I do want you to be thinking about a podcast, an explicit podcast appropriate story from Uganda can be, and like I've heard all sorts of interesting things that isn't going to scare everybody away, but it's going to go, hey, that's an interesting thing. And some of them are quite interesting. Looking again at a CEO mindset with a nonprofit. One of the things that you say that really strikes me as well is how people can work with a nonprofit. And you say that people can give up 3 things. And I've heard you say this a lot in different speaking engagements. And I think you said it to me. Let's talk about each of those things, because this is another thing that I wasn't really thinking about. So yeah, how can people get involved in their favorite nonprofit or whatever the thing is?
Absolutely. So I always, and again, this is just my style partly. I always say you can give your cash, your kung fu, or your connections. And cash is obvious.
Trademarked.
Yeah, that's right. TM. Cash is obvious. So many of these things, the most efficient way to add value is the portability and immediacy of finances. And I say cash, but really a sophisticated organization is ready to take finances in any form. And from working at us, we've worked really hard to understand not just how to do the normal, what I call retail donations, cash, check, and card, and ACH, of course. But we first started working with cryptocurrencies in 2017, early. Wow. And so when it was time to start, talking to other people about crypto donations, and we don't get a lot of them because the markets have been up and down, but even donor advised funds and all kinds of asset donations. So we understand that, and that allows us to really partner effectively with sophisticated situations. And don't get us wrong, we're a small organization, but we're trying to make the door easy to walk through. So cash, that's great. Kung Fu, though. Kung Fu is where I talk about, what are your special skills, right? What are your skills, your abilities, and your superpowers? Because a lot of people, they don't think of what they do as a superpower. I met with a sales director for a beverage company today. We had lunch, and I'm like, hey, we're talking, our Aqua Trust enterprise, we're trying to talk to communities and say, hey, will you sign an agreement to let us maintain your well, and you'll pay these small fees, but we will guarantee 99% of the time your well is working. And that's a sales relationship. And so,
yes, it is.
Believe it or not, this guy doesn't think of himself as being ready to help us with poverty alleviation, but I guarantee he is. You're a great example. I mean, those of you that listen to your podcast know that you do a lot of coaching and facilitating, and your special skills have been invaluable to our team. Like, that's one of the most valuable things that your family's been able to contribute to our mission, is helping our team grow. You've coached some of our leaders. You have facilitated sessions to help us be more effective. So Kung Fu is everything from being a diesel mechanic to a sales guy to a coach, or on this side of things, helping, with various different special skills that we need. And then connections is all about that network, right? A relationship, a community that you serve. We are still a small organization that is mostly unknown in this world. And so you are a broadcast tower, whoever you are, the you that's you, and the you that's me, and the you that's listening. And you are broadcasting about the things that you think are interesting and exciting and worth it. And whether you're talking around your dinner table, a boardroom table, or on the street with your friends, people are part of circles of faith communities or civic organizations. And all of those are places where opening your mouth and talking about the causes you care about are a huge way of inviting more people to get curious and step in.
So James, you had mentioned you're a small organization. and I would assert that you all have some outsized impact, and you had the chance to do some pretty cool stuff earlier this year. Maybe it was late last year. And UWP, you got to represent Ugandan Water Project at the Clinton Foundation, at the global
Initiative, yeah.
the global
Yep.
Clinton Global Initiative.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about that and what that is and who you were in the room with, because you're being a humble guy. You're like, yeah, we may be small in terms of like our scope and the number of employees, but you all are another example. And this is where, and I'm calling this out for all the business leaders, is how do you show up to play with the big boys, even if you don't necessarily relate to yourself as the big boys and the big girls? And this is what startup founders do all the time too, is they're in the room, hey, we're competing against Salesforce, we're competing against these other, not that you're competing, but this is like the vibe that UWP gets off. And I know you've heard this from people, is you all appear to be a pretty substantial organization based on how you show up, how your team shows up, and the efficiency which you do things at. So let's talk a lot about the global initiative for a few minutes.
Yeah. Well, I will say excellence over indexes.
So does.
So, the truth is just getting good at what you do definitely helps you play above, fight above your weight class. And that is something we believed in, just getting out there and, doing the hard work. Sometimes the biggest difference. I mean, I remember early in our organization, we were starting to grow fast. This went from an idea to something of real substance pretty quick. And I remember I had a friend, she was also trying to get something started, and she was at a barbecue, she asked me, she's like, hey, so what's the secret? What's the secret? I'm seeing all this stuff happen. What's the secret? And I told her, I'm like, it's not a secret. This happened to be the day after. I said, hey, yesterday I left my driveway at 4 a.m. and I drove to Pittsburgh for a cup of coffee and a check for $15,000. And then I drove home. And then I had other work to do when I got home. Like, it's just a lot of long work. This morning, today that we are recording this, my first call was at 5 a.m. because it's, it was partners in Europe, right? And so doing the hard work refines your process and gets you better, and excellence over indexes. So part of it is I believe in the quality of what we do because it's been tested in the arena where we work. Yeah. I'm not afraid to put it up against and be compared and measured against others that are the best. And so that allows us to walk with our head up into big environments with significant people. Now, you also have to balance that with humility in our heart.
Yeah.
Right? I have confidence in my gaze, humility in my heart. And because I don't pretend that we're not a small organization. We do have limits. Sure. The truth is I can't reasonably steward $1 billion donation rate.
Sure. You'd be open to the conversation.
I'd work with that problem.
You'd work with that problem. That's a great problem to have.
But even I will say, oh yeah, there's a limit to our capacity because of our size. But to walk into some of these environments, whether it's World Water Week in Stockholm or Clinton Global Initiative, and the Clinton Global Initiative is one of the most influential rooms when it comes to poverty, alleviation, and suffering in the world. They enter into the conversations about some of the big, Jane Goodall was there. Obviously,
it's Davos. It's Davos, the economic summit, but for nonprofit, and it takes place in New York every year.
Yeah, it's like Jose Andres, the chef behind World Central Kitchen, was there. I sat in a session, 25 feet from Matt Damon.
Yeah.
It's all of those kinds of people. And then, of course, it's President and Secretary Clinton and their daughter, Dr. Chelsea Clinton.
Dr. Chelsea Clinton,
at the time, President Biden and his wife showed up one evening. So, it is global leaders.
Yeah.
Muhammad Yunus, who is currently leading Bangladesh, revolutionized our concept of micro loans when he wrote the Grameen Bank. These people are in the room, and I mean in a room, in the small rooms, and you're there working on stuff together. So high caliber, and I think the thing to remember is they bring certain things to the table I don't, but then we bring things that they don't. We have a visibility on our part of the need and the situation that needs and is vital to the overall conversation.
Yeah. One last thing about people leader, and let's grab a couple stories from the field.
Sure.
Stories from putting clean water into Uganda or giving access to clean water, because I'm sure everybody listening goes, that feels a little fraught with risk in a variety of ways, not like, well, lethally, but also just some, just like your cleanliness and all those things. And I got to witness a couple of these things.
Sure.
I want to ask you, the excellence comment is powerful. And that is a force multiplier for any business, way over and above staffing and all those. How do you ensure that your team keeps that in mind, that you're keeping your staff excellent all the time? And as the leader, how do you think about it when you notice somebody who has the capacity, has the willingness to learn, and maybe they run into their own version, like we all do, of their own breakdowns in their life, or they just need a little extra something? How do you think about that to keep people going? And excellence, I would assert that excellence for the Ugandan staff might mean something a little bit different than excellence for Americans, depending on the education level. And I also know for a fact that some of your Ugandans have master's degrees and, like medical, like there's some people that are very highly educated and would run circles around me.
Several of our Ugandan staff have a better formal education than I did. Many of them went to a more pedigree university than I did. Many of them have had formal instruction beyond mine, for sure. But so first of all, I look and say, hey, when humans are having human experiences that impact their performance, and that could be anything from, especially, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to go too deep in this direction too fast, but keep in mind the people that you met are still living in the context of abject poverty as a nation in so many ways. And that comes with a lot of things. I never realized how many of our team I would have to walk through tragedy with. And so it is a regular occurrence. People die, people get sick, people lose children. I always say, we have really had to walk through some hard things. When they're doing that, that's not the time to measure their performance primarily. It's the opportunity to build trust and care and that loyalty, right? Even from a practical business standpoint. First of all, I think that's good, being good humans and good community, right? That's something I want to be part of. But even in terms of the efficiency of the organization, community on a mission and engagement and with low turnover becomes efficient and effective. And so when people have their life, on the rocks, then that's the time to focus on how do you build care and trust, and it really develops that tight bond of loyalty among you when they're struggling. Now, when they're trying to learn, or it's not a major crisis, it's just a struggle, coming alongside people, making sure we've defined success, created opportunity. And then one of the first things I look at is, hey, how hard are we driving? Because if you are redlining your team, there's no chance to step back and actually improve your ability to do the work. You can't build capacity if 100%. It takes some capacity to build capacity. And so if you're completely redlined, you cannot get any better. And so you actually have to support people so that they can, have a little bit of vibrancy in their work, whether it's creativity or cross-pollination with other professionals, or taking the time to read a book or to step away from the work. And so you do need that. We also recognize that it's important that this is serious work, but we try to cultivate a culture that doesn't take ourselves too seriously. We try to have fun in the process. And play is a big part of it. And so there's you've been around. It's a lot of laughter. There's a lot of laughter in all of our offices. And I think that really helps. That helps people perform better as well, because you can have a serious conversation about someone's struggle or failure or something they blew it on, or you can come alongside them and and say, hey, so how do you think that went? And it's clear, and you go, yeah, that's or I'll grab something off camera and show you, like, or I'll just, so something didn't go well and I'll just hand them, we've got this little plush dumpster fire. And I'm like, so I'm just going to sit this on your desk for today. I think you need this. You
let me know how this lands for you. I'm not going to give you any other information, but it is a dumpster fire. You read into that what you will.
But what we do is really hard. It's one of the most persistent problems on the planet. Of course, we're going to encounter some dumpster fires.
Of course.
But that's not the measure of them as a person, right? It's just a measure of how one outcome went. And the reality is, we take it in the teeth all the time.
Yeah.
But if you have that strong foundation, that strong community, you get up and you keep going.
Nice. Let's talk about ways people can get connected. And we have a specific thing. You have a specific event that's going on right now, and then we'll leave the cliffhanger for a tale from your journey. And I don't even know if I'm going to know the story. So let's start with, people want to learn more. Obviously, you can just Google Ugandan Water Project. There's only one Ugandan Water Project in the world, as far as I know.
Yep.
Only one, James Harrington.
UgandanWaterProject.com. Yep.
Yeah. What are y'all working on right now specifically?
So the big event coming up?
Whatever you want to tell us about.
Yeah. So in April 12th, we have our 5K, and this is one of our annual events. That's a great opportunity for people to, no matter where you are. Our office is based in Rochester, New York. So we certainly do a in-person version of it. You can meet us, on April 12th in the morning. We get together at Powder Mills Park here, and we run and walk this 5K. But virtually, we have people participate wherever you are. We'll send you out a T-shirt and a race bib and some fun stuff.
So fun.
But between now and then, you can register as an individual or as a team at UgandanWaterProject.com/5K. And it's a lot of fun because people compete. I don't care how fast you are in the race. We like to celebrate people setting fundraising goals and raising money, and they compete against each other. And Jason, you and your family have gotten into it in some hilarious ways. In fact, I think you cracked a rib last year.
I didn't quite crack a rib, but I was too old and I did a cartwheel on camera and it did not go well. So that's not happening this year.
Right. Motivational antics, right?
Antics,
If you watch our social media, I just put out the first leaderboard.
It's really fun.
News desk update. But we pit teams against each other. And it just is so fun for about 3 or 4 weeks of just intense effort to kind of draw some attention. And then we get together and we try to raise this year, the goal is $125,000. So whether you want to run, walk, or just support one of these teams, hey, go on the leaderboard and move somebody up. It's a great way to help fuel the work that happens all year long. And, everybody can participate in it.
I got a chance to go last year with my kids.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see the community show up for you all. I was really impressed with how many people you had. And not to put a damper on, the weather was awful. I don't think it could have gotten, it was like 40 degrees and raining, and there was kids out there. But man, the level of love that I witnessed for UWP is one of the local charities, and the level of love people have for you and your team. And I mean, that room was packed. I don't know how many people were there, but I said the number of people that are going to show up for this thing when it was that miserable out was really amazing. I'm going to do a quick pitch.
It's a warm community. And if you've never been part of something like that, again, sometimes you wonder, what does it feel like to actually belong to a community that has a cause? Because, again, I've done the donations where it feels like I'm just throwing my
of course,
a few bucks into the ocean of good intentions. And this is different. This is community on a mission, and we show up for one another, we show up for the cause, and we show up in whatever weather, and it is a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. I'm going to do a quick pitch.
Yes.
If you are interested in learning more, there will be a link in the podcast show notes for a specific team that's raising funds for the second time in a row.
Yes.
It's called Sunshine Daydream. We finished in second place last year.
So close, Jason. So close.
But if you look at what we raised, just to do a not so humble brag, it was really my family and another family who raised all that money. We finished in second place. The people who finished in first, were they a car dealership, or were they like not going door to door? I don't know if they were like they had like scaled impact that had them barely beat us, and we kind of crushed it.
You did a really good job coming in as the number one loser.
As the number one loser.
See,
I did come in as the number one loser.
Now you're starting to see the affectionate, goading that I do. So basically, this is what I do for the next 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks as we're leading up to this. It's just a roast. It's basically it's sort of like encouragement and a little bit of pricking and prodding here, but it's all in good fun.
Yeah, it's all great fun.
And
you steal trophies. You steal trophies from car dealerships. There's videos of it. It's amazing.
We do have trophies, and there's great prizes too. Honestly,
there is great prizes.
It's part of the fun, as we say, and that goes back to when I was a kid. I went to this private school and we did a fundraiser, and if we sold enough of whatever it was, we could pick something from the prize sheet. And that was when Walkman radios were new, and there was a picture of a Walkman, and that's what my sister and I worked hard for. And when we got it, it was a piece of junk. Like it broke the first day, and it was only an AM radio. And so I was so disillusioned. I said, if I'm ever in a position to make sure that we can do something with prizes, it's going to be stuff that people really feel like, oh, that was great. What an awesome thing to be part of, and what a great reward. So definitely,
you and your team definitely generate really good raffle prizes and like things from sponsors. Like genuinely stuff.
They're amazing.
Yeah, like I remember I won a case of wine, and the wine was great.
Yes. Yeah.
I won the case of wine at the golf tournament.
This is the Finger Lakes area, and lots of great wineries. And so definitely. So if you like that kind of thing, you want to get out and get active.
It's a lot of fun.
No matter where you are, the virtual version is still a lot of fun too. Please do that.
So wrapping up, I promised you all a story from the field. James, you have about 3 to 5 minutes to give us whatever you want to share about one of the times in Uganda, something that interesting that happened to you and the team.
Yeah, let's see. I can remember. Gosh, there's been so many situations, but I remember one time when we were trying to go out. We were trying to head down to this one area. It was supposed to be about 3.5 hours away. And I mean, this just to understand some of the context of where we have to get to. And as we're driving to get to this site, we encountered the fact that one of the bridges had washed out. And it's not like there's a lot of easy detours. And so,
nor are there lots of extra public works people that are easily putting up the secondary bridge to help you get across. Yeah.
No. And so we were like, oh, it's going to be another like 2 to 3 hours to get around. Right. And so we're having to sidetrack, and we get way down this road, and it was really late. And so there's no one else on the road, dirt road. And we're in a van, and it's a 4-wheel drive van, but it's just a van, and we come over this little rise, and the headlights, I see water because it's been raining, and the road is flooded out, and I can see, it's about 50 yards, and I'm thinking, I wonder how deep that is. And I get out, and I'm looking at it in the night, and I'm like, I kneel down to feel what kind of mud it is, because if it's sandy mud, that's a good sign. But if it was the really sticky, slick mud, and I'm like, lots of clay, that grabs your tires. And I hear some people in the bushes off to the side. There's no street light, so I'm like, and they're kind of just murmuring and talking, and I was like, hello, friends. Does anyone speak English? And they come over, and I said, we're chatting. I said, this water, were people going through today? And they're like, not so much. And I said, this car, what do you think? Can I make it? And they said, if you try it, sir, you'll be sleeping on our veranda tonight. And I was like, oh. And I said, is there another way? And they said, there's another way, but you will not find it. And I said, is there someone that can show me the way? And so this mother and her teenage son get in the car, because she knows the way and he speaks English. And they pile in. And we go back, and we get to a part of the road, and they said, turn up. And I look, and it's just a rock hillside. And I'm like, oh, crap. And so I'm like, all right, everybody hold on. And I just gun it. And we just fly and bounce up this thing. And it's like pretty precarious. Get up. And sure enough, at the top of this ridge, but it was touch and go, and we found our way down and around, and we ended up getting on. But like, that's just everyday stuff. That's just trying to drive to work. And so we've got all kinds of stories of the treacherous journey, but at the end of it, there's all kinds of stories also of trying to fix wells that have been broken for years, and fishing pipes out of them, and restoring water. And there's all kinds of stories of really restoring hope at the other end that makes, whether it's, I've had food poisoning, more times than I can count. I've had chronic diarrhea. on so many trips or sunburned or all kinds of stuff. We've had stuff stolen. We've had car accidents, all kinds of things. It's a rough place. But at the end of the day, when it works, people get safe water and their lives transform.
Yeah.
And I think of Christine Nyong'o, who just last week got a water connection at her home. And I think about how that personal transformation doesn't matter, all the risk, all the challenge, all the long flights or the long drives, it's worth it.
That's beautiful. James, thank you so much for being on. I have so much appreciation for the work that you do and the rest of your team does, both here and in Uganda and abroad. We wish you the very best success in 2025 with all you're doing. Again, if you're interested and want to engage in any way, we'll put all these show notes in the link. The main one, though, is the Sunshine Daydream fundraising link.
That is the one.
Because myself and my teammate Tanner, we are very competitive individuals. And we don't like to lose, and we don't like being the first losers. So please
show them some love. They can take the first place position this year. I'm confident
we can take the first place. We're going to beat a car dealership with the two of us. But James, yeah, seriously, it's such a pleasure to get to know you and the team, and just you all are doing such amazing work. Thank you so much for being on.
Great to be with you. We'll see you out there on the race course.
On the race course, definitely not driving up a rock hill in the middle of Uganda. No. If you happen to visit Uganda, James will not subject you to that. That's for CEOs who work for the company only. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.